The day my sister eloped for love, Asher Fu, the top heir of Beijing's elite circle who was originally engaged to her, turned around and slipped a ring onto my finger. He doted on me like no other, making me the most envied Mrs. Fu. Even the notoriously demanding old Madame Fu patted my hand in approval, saying, "This is the true daughter-in-law of the Fu family." 3 years passed until my sister returned home terminally ill with cancer. My mother broke down in tears before me, sobbing until she fainted. "I'm begging you. Let Eleanor have her final wish fulfilled in her remaining days." My brother grabbed Asher Fu by the arm, pressing him relentlessly. "She just wants to wear a wedding dress once. If you still consider me your brother, grant her this last wish." My father issued an ultimatum, his voice cold and unyielding. "If Eleanor doesn't get to hold her wedding before she closes her eyes, I'll disown you as my daughter." Asher Fu pulled me into his arms in front of everyone, declaring firmly, "Beatrice is my only wife." Yet within a month he was forced to kneel on one knee, slipping the Fu family heirloom ring onto my sister's finger and going through the entire wedding ceremony with her. His eyes red with what he claimed was regret, he explained to me, "I agreed to this wedding to keep you from falling out with your family. It's also a way to send her off properly in her final days." I was moved to tears by the sacrifices he'd made for me. I watched them hold the wedding of the century, embarking on a round-the-world honeymoon. That is, until I went to register my pregnancy and needed to verify my spouse's identity. The nurse frowned in confusion as she flipped through my marriage certificate. "The serial number here doesn't exist at all, and the official seal is fake." I rushed to the Civil Affairs Bureau to verify the certificate myself, only to be met with a crushing truth on the screen. Legal spouse of Asher Fu, Eleanor Zhao, my sister who was supposedly on her deathbed. So their sham wedding had been real all along. They'd tied the knot for good. And the marriage certificate I'd held on to for 3 years? It was the counterfeit one. My heart turned to ashes. When Asher Fu finally noticed my eerie calm, he scolded me sharply, telling me to be more understanding. I smiled and pulled out a brand new red marriage certificate, this one bearing the name of his bitterest rival. "Sorry, but I'm already married now. This time it's real." I pushed the certificate toward the civil affairs officer again, my voice trembling. "This can't be right. Is there a glitch in the system? Please check again." The officer's cold, impassive voice delivered the final verdict, as merciless as a death sentence. "Ms. Zhao, checking again won't change the result. System records show that Mr. Asher Fu's legal spouse is Eleanor Zhao, registered 1 month ago. You, on the other hand, are unmarried." The words struck me like a slap across the face, leaving my cheeks burning with shame and pain. I instinctively wrapped my arms around my abdomen, protecting the tiny life growing inside me. Just yesterday, Asher Fu had pressed his lips to this very spot, whispering softly that he wanted a daughter. Today he'd handed me this cruel, heart-wrenching betrayal as a gift. I hailed a taxi and headed straight for Fu Tower. I stood before the exclusive elevator leading to the penthouse suite, my finger hovering over the fingerprint scanner. A ridiculous, devastating realization hit me then. After 3 years of marriage, I never even had the permission to step into his private domain. "Madam." Asher's assistant came running after me, panic etched on his face. "Mr. Fu is in the middle of an important meeting." "Scan your card," I heard myself say, my voice cold as ice. "I'll wait for him upstairs." Cornered by my unwavering gaze, the assistant had no choice but to swipe his access card. The elevator doors slid open, and a blast of cold air mixed with the strong cloying scent of perfume hit me square in the face. I looked up, and my blood ran cold at the sight of 2 overlapping figures behind the frosted glass of the floor-to-ceiling window. I froze in the doorway, rooted to the spot. Eleanor's voice, weak and sickly yet dripping with malice, drifted over to me. "Asher, letting me stay here to recuperate. What if your sister finds out?" She covered her mouth with a handkerchief, coughing softly, but her eyes glinted with provocation as they flicked toward the doorway. "She's the youngest, spoiled rotten since childhood. She's never liked sharing her things with anyone. My brother and I have always indulged her, but you're the one thing I could never bear to give up." She pouted, her tone laced with feigned grievance as she tugged on Asher's tie, pressing her body against his suggestively. I was too scared to tell her the truth that all these years, "You've been waiting for me to come back and marry you. If she finds out we finally got our happy ending, do you think she'll be able to handle it? Happy ending? True love finally united? My legs buckled beneath me and I stumbled back a step. So that was the truth. On the other side of the glass, Asher's voice was filled with a tenderness I had never heard directed at me. All right, let's not talk about her. Did you take your medicine? His thumb brushed gently against her lips, his tone soft with concern. You've been coughing so much. It breaks my heart to see you like this. I slowly withdrew the foot I'd almost stepped forward, my heart shattering into a million pieces. As I turned to leave, the assistant chased after me in a fluster. Madam, why are you? I ignored him, stepping into the elevator without a word, the doors sliding shut behind me with a deafening clang. When I got home, I found myself walking to the study on autopilot. I turned on the computer, intending to draft a divorce agreement. But then it hit me, if our marriage certificate was fake, did I even need to go through the motions of a divorce? A bitter laugh escaped my lips as I pulled open a drawer. My fingers brushed against a hardcover photo album I'd never seen before. I flipped to the first page and my breath caught in my throat. There was Eleanor at 18, her white dress fluttering in the wind. Eleanor at 20, her smile bright and radiant beneath her graduation cap. Eleanor at 25, standing by the sea, her long hair billowing in the breeze. Every photo's edges were worn smooth from years of being touched and caressed over and over again. The last photo had a line scrawled on the back in sharp, angular handwriting. Eleanor, 3 years have passed. You've finally come home. I cried until my chest ached, then suddenly burst out laughing, a hysterical, broken sound. So that's it. For 3 years he'd been hiding in the corners of his life, poring over her photos when I wasn't looking. So when my parents and brother begged him to marry Eleanor, the tremor in his hands wasn't sympathy for me, it was excitement. So on the day of their wedding, when he held her face and his eyes turned red, it wasn't regret, it was fulfillment of finally getting the woman he'd always wanted. Me. I'd been foolish enough to think he was my savior. I closed the photo album and put it back where I'd found it, my hands shaking uncontrollably. A wave of nausea hit me suddenly, churning in my stomach. I stumbled to the bathroom, retching violently into the toilet bowl. When I finally looked up, my reflection stared back at me, pale, hollow, and utterly broken. It was then that everything clicked into place, the way the civil affairs officer had acted so unnaturally deferential to Asher on the day we registered our marriage. The way our certificate hadn't been printed in front of us. If he never loved me, why did he marry me in the first place? The sound of the front door unlocking jolted me out of my daze. Beatrice. Asher's voice echoed through the quiet apartment. He had his suit jacket slung over one arm. Why aren't the lights on? I passed by the old Chen's kanji shop on my way back. Come here, my little glutton, and have some warm porridge. The fragrant aroma of porridge wafted through the air, but my eyes were fixed on the collar of his shirt, on the bright red lipstick stain, taunting me like a drop of blood. I took the bowl of porridge from his hands, and a laugh escaped my lips before I could stop it. What are you laughing at? Asher asked, his brow furrowing slightly. Nothing, I said, stirring the porridge slowly with my spoon. I just realized. I was nothing more than a pawn in your little game. He frowned, about to say something, when his phone suddenly lit up. The lock screen notification glared at me, bold and unmissable. Wife. It wasn't a message from me. My hand trembled and the hot porridge spilled onto my pajamas, scalding my skin. Asher fumbled for a tissue in a panic, dropping his phone on the floor with a loud clatter. He quickly locked the screen, pretending I hadn't seen a thing, and changed the subject as casually as he could. I heard from Assistant Lee that you went to the penthouse of Fu Tower today? I continued eating the porridge in silence, the spoon clinking softly against the bottom of the bowl. I wanted to hear how he would weasel his way out of this one. I suppose you saw Eleanor there, he said, his tone unnervingly calm. The penthouse isn't suitable for her to recuperate. She'll move into the house with us the day after tomorrow. The spoon slipped from my hand, clattering against the edge of the bowl. I felt a surge of overwhelming sadness, a bitter laugh bubbling up in my throat. Foolish me for thinking he might feel even a shred of guilt. The master bedroom is spacious and bright, he said, adjusting his cufflinks with his head down, as if discussing something as trivial as the weather. Perfect for her recovery. You'll move to the guest room temporarily. When I didn't respond, he assumed I'd agreed. Also, there's a charity gala next week. The Fu family will be auctioning off several valuable pieces. I'll send you the list later. But Eleanor wants to go too. She mentioned she'd like to wear that starry sky gown of yours. Give it to her. I cut him off, looking up and forcing a smile. She's the patient here. She should have priority. His expression flickered with surprise, then relaxed into a relieved smile. He leaned down to kiss me. I turned my head away and his kiss landed on empty air. Beatrice, he sighed, sounding exasperated. You're still upset about this? I'm doing all this for you, he said, rubbing his temples tiredly. Do you want to watch your family disown you over this? Can't you appreciate the sacrifices I'm making for us? Sacrifices? What a grand, noble sacrifice indeed. Was he sacrificing the chance to marry his one true love? Or sacrificing the chance to spend his nights with her in the penthouse suite? Yes, I heard myself say, my voice numb and lifeless. You're right. I appreciate it. Those 3 words seemed to satisfy him. His expression softened and he turned to head for the bathroom, finally letting his guard down. The sound of running water filled the room. Moments later his phone lit up again. I stared at the glowing screen, my hand moving toward it as if possessed by a ghost. Message after message popped up from Eleanor Zhao. My last wish is to go on a round-the-world honeymoon with my first love. I made the travel itinerary all by myself. I clicked on the file she'd sent, flipping through the pages one by one. A sunset suite in Santorini. A candlelit dinner under the Eiffel Tower in Paris. A private breakfast for 2 on a gondola in Venice. These were all the places he'd promised to take me to, but had never gotten around to. My fingers began to shake violently, so badly I could barely hold the phone. So that's the truth. All these years I'd been nothing more than a cheap substitute. He'd filled the void of losing his white moonlight with the same sweet words, the same empty promises, words and promises that were never meant for me. I suddenly remembered our hasty wedding. No wedding photos, no honeymoon. Just a simple family dinner at the old Fu mansion. Not even a single bridal bouquet for me that day. All he'd given me was a solemn promise, vowing that he'd make it up to me someday with a grand, unforgettable ceremony. A promise he'd repeated countless times over the years, always brushing it off later with the excuse that he was too busy. Yet now, this same busy man had dropped everything to accompany his new wife through every single step of the wedding process, from the betrothal gifts to the honeymoon. I finally understood. Time can always be made, but I was never worth making time for. I locked his phone and put it back where it belonged, my fingers cold as ice. Let those 3 years be a lesson learned. Let them be nothing more than a waste of my life thrown to the dogs. Asher emerged from the bathroom wrapped in a bath towel, to find me clearing the table. Beatrice. He came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. Leave the dishes for Aunt Lou to clean. Didn't you text me earlier saying you had a big surprise for me? I forced a smile, my hand instinctively resting on my abdomen, and whispered, it was a lie. The next day, a special reminder on my phone alerted me to the Fu family dinner I was supposed to attend. I had always held a deep respect for Asher's parents. Even if this marriage had turned out to be such a farce, I couldn't afford to be rude to the elders. I put on a light layer of makeup to cover the exhaustion from my sleepless night. When I arrived, the carved wooden door of the old Fu mansion was slightly ajar. I reached out to push it open, but my hand froze midair. The seat that should have been mine was occupied by Eleanor Zhao. She was wearing an elegant plain white cheongsam, her long hair coiled up neatly, and she was lowering her head to sip the soup Asher Fu handed her. Eleanor, this soup is good for your stomach. Drink more of it. Asher's parents didn't look the least bit troubled by this arrangement. I remembered my first time at a Fu family dinner. His mother had made me stand by the side to serve everyone else until the last guest left, only then allowing me to sit down to eat the already cold leftovers. Back then, Asher had merely said indifferently, old money families have strict rules. I'm sorry you have to put up with this. So those rules were only meant for people he didn't care about. I dug my nails into my palms so hard I could barely feel the pain. I turned my head ready to leave. Beatrice. Eleanor Zhao suddenly looked up, feigning surprise as she called out to me. Come over here and sit down, won't you? A barrage of stares shot at me from around the table, sharp as arrows. Asher Fu strode over and grabbed my wrist tightly. What are you doing here? Shouldn't I be? I shot back with a bitter laugh. Mom and Dad thought we'd already gotten divorced. I whipped my head around to glare at him. So it turned out I was the only one who'd been trying to keep up appearances, afraid that this absurd mess would hurt the elders' feelings. While all of them, they'd known the truth all along. And they'd all condoned it. There was no longer any point in me staying here. I'm not feeling well. I want to go home and rest. No. He tightened his grip on my wrist, his fingers digging into my skin. Eleanor asked you to join us. If you leave now, she'll overthink it again. Asher Fu. My voice trembled with rage. Beatrice Xiao. He cut me off sharply, his eyes cold as if he were looking at a stranger throwing a tantrum. Do you really think I don't know what you're up to, showing up here out of the blue? Tears welled up in my eyes instantly. At the other end of the table, Eleanor Xiao immediately broke into a fit of violent coughing, as if she were on the verge of drawing her last breath. Without a moment's hesitation, Asher Fu let go of my hand and rushed over to her, not sparing a single glance at my stumbling figure. Eleanor Xiao spoke weakly, her voice laced with false sincerity. Beatrice. Are you still blaming me? If you can't forgive me now. Asher Fu's face darkened. Beatrice Xiao. Sit down. I didn't move. At his silent signal, two maids rushed over, one on each side, and pressed down hard on my shoulders, forcing me roughly into the chair. Be more sensible, Asher Fu said coldly. Don't make a scene and embarrass everyone. I let them pin me down, feeling nothing, not even the pain. Satisfied that I wouldn't resist, he squeezed my hand briefly before turning back to Eleanor Xiao, resuming his attentive care of her. As for me, I sat there like an outsider, stuck in the most remote corner of the table. Asher's sisters-in-law and cousins whispered among themselves, their snickers loud enough for me to hear. Some people cling to their position for 3 whole years, only to be outdone by someone who's been back for 3 days. Exactly. Brother has wanted a divorce for ages. He just dragged it out of courtesy. Sister Eleanor is such a sweetheart, gentle and graceful. Unlike certain people who always have a stick up their ass. I endured their snide remarks in silence. It wasn't until the dinner finally ended that I stood up to bid Asher's parents goodbye. His mother nodded perfunctorily, her tone icy. I know I've been strict with you, but I was only trying to raise you to be a proper mistress of the Fu family. But you, gallivanting around nightclubs every single night. If Eleanor hadn't told me, I would have never guessed you were such a shameless creature underneath it all. The blood in my veins turned to ice in an instant. This baseless accusation, was it a going-away present from my own sister? Mom. Asher Fu suddenly spoke up, his brows furrowed tightly. That's enough. I looked at him, a flicker of comfort rising in my heart. At least he was still trying to defend me. But the next second he wrapped an arm around Eleanor Xiao's shoulders, his voice soft with concern. Eleanor has a weak heart. Don't let her hear these ugly things. I was left speechless. So this was the man I'd shared a bed with for 3 years, the man who couldn't even bear to say a single word to defend me, not even she's not that kind of person. The night wind bit at my skin as I stepped out of the old Fu mansion. Every time I'd come here before, I'd arrived hand in hand with Asher Fu and left the same way. Today I'd come alone and I was leaving alone. A news alert suddenly popped up on my phone screen. The accompanying photo showed my back at their wedding, sitting alone at the servants' table. The comment section was flooded with mockery. I heard she's been sneaking off to nightclubs to hook up with male models every night. Serves her right to get dumped. That table for the ex-wife was a last-minute addition. Even the tableware was one set short of the main table. The Fu family's attitude couldn't be any clearer. 3 years of marriage and not a single child to show for it. Mr. Fu probably couldn't even stand to touch her. Now that the real Mrs. Fu is back, it's time for certain people to disappear on their own accord. Oh no, the substitute finally got kicked out. After 3 years, it's still her in the end. I don't think I need to spell out who the real love is here, do I? I turned off my phone screen calmly. I remembered 3 years ago when Eleanor Xiao's scandal first hit the headlines. Asher Fu had summoned his PR team in the middle of the night. Every single negative news piece had vanished without a trace within 3 hours. But now, with these blatant lies about me spreading like wildfire, he didn't care the slightest bit. I just reached the front door of my apartment when my phone started buzzing like crazy. My mom, my dad. I let out a long, weary sigh. Eleanor Zhao and I were half-sisters. She was the one my mother had raised by her side. Even as her biological daughter, I had never been able to replace Eleanor's place in Mom's heart. Eleanor Zhao was right about one thing: I'd never liked sharing my things with others since I was a kid. Because they would never understand that everything they could get with a single reach of their hand, I had to claw and scrape for in the dirt to earn. When my parents gave them pocket money, they always forgot about me, the younger one. The family maid could never remember that I was allergic to mangoes. Several times her pastries nearly cost me my life. Even on my wedding day, my mother had cried and said, "If Eleanor hadn't been seduced into going abroad, you wouldn't be the bride today. She would have been the one standing here." And now they wanted me, the woman whose husband had been stolen from her, to smile for a family portrait, pretending that everything was perfect and harmonious. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Asher Fu. He sent me a location directly. "Get here now." I let out a cold laugh and turned off my phone. This time I wasn't going to grovel to anyone anymore. I was about to unlock the door when two strange men suddenly rushed out from the shadows. They grabbed me by the arms, one on each side, and pinned me down. "What are you doing?" I struggled violently. "Let go of me." The black sedan sped through the night and I clung tightly to the door handle, my heart pounding. Kidnapping? Revenge? Or? The car screeched to a halt in front of the photo studio and I finally realized it was Asher Fu who'd had me brought here by force. I was pushed roughly inside, my whole body trembling with cold rage. Eleanor Zhao was leaning in Asher Fu's arms, dressed in a snow-white wedding dress. "Beatrice is here?" She smiled sweetly. "Will you stand next to me?" My brother lunged forward and grabbed me, afraid I'd cause a scene. "She can stand next to me. You're the star of the show today." As the photographer adjusted everyone's positions, I was gradually squeezed to the very edge of the frame. The photo was finally taken and I stumbled forward, desperate to leave. But Eleanor Zhao suddenly walked over to me, leaning in to whisper in my ear, her voice dripping with malice. "Beatrice Zhao, are you some kind of doormat? I stole your husband right out from under you and you're not even going to hit me?" I knew exactly what she was doing, provoking me. Ever since we were kids she'd always done this to me, deliberately pushing my buttons until I snapped, then playing the victim to show how weak and helpless she was. But this time I didn't move. She wasn't worth it. I turned to leave, but she suddenly stumbled backward, letting out a scream as the fabric of her wedding dress tore with a sharp, ear-splitting sound. Everyone immediately swarmed around her. "Beatrice Zhao." Asher Fu was the first to rush over, slapping me hard across the face and sending me crashing to the floor. "Apologize." My ears were ringing, my head spinning. The force of the fall was so brutal that a sharp, searing pain suddenly shot through my abdomen. "Asher." I realized something was terribly wrong, clutching my stomach and doubling over in agony. "My stomach hurts. Please take me to the hospital. Hurry." Inside me was the baby I'd waited 2 long years for. Playing the victim after just one slap? Asher Fu sneered. "Eleanor is dying of late-stage cancer and she's not half as dramatic as you are. Beatrice, you've always been such a scheming liar since you were a kid." My mother glared at me, her eyes filled with disgust. "Eleanor doesn't have long left. Can't you just let her have this one thing?" My brother grabbed me by the hair, yanking my head back forcefully. "Someone slaps you and you clutch your stomach? Who do you think you're performing for?" They crowded around Eleanor Zhao and left, not a single one of them sparing me a backward glance. I curled up on the cold floor of the photo studio, my phone screen soaked in blood. With trembling fingers I finally pressed the long-forgotten number, my voice barely a whisper. "Come pick me up now. I'll agree to everything you said." It was 10 o'clock at night when Asher Fu brought Eleanor Zhao back to the villa. He headed straight for the master bedroom on the 2nd floor. The door was tightly shut, a clear sign that the person inside was in no mood for company. "Beatrice." His voice softened a fraction, unlike its usual sharp tone. "I told you earlier that Eleanor would be staying here to recuperate. It's your fault for shoving her at the photo studio. Given how fragile she is right now, I couldn't bear to leave her alone for a moment, so I had to bring her home early." His knuckles rapped against the solid wooden door, sending out a dull thud. He went on, "I also told you before you'll have to move to the guest room for a few days first." His words trailed off as a fit of quiet coughing suddenly erupted from Eleanor Zhao standing beside him. Asher immediately turned to her, but froze the second his hand wrapped around the doorknob. The master bedroom door wasn't locked. The darkness seeping through the crack sent an inexplicable chill down his spine. He pushed the door open gently. Moonlight streamed in through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting a pale glow over the neatly made bed. The bathroom was silent, no sign of any movement. It didn't look like anyone was there. "Asher." Eleanor Zhao called out to him in a timid, trembling voice. "Is your sister still angry with me?" Asher snapped back to his senses, letting out a cold laugh. "Looks like she's finally learned how to throw a tantrum. Fine by me. Saves me the trouble of making her move to the guest room right away and wounding her pride." He tugged irritably at his tie, loosening it a little. "Don't worry. She'll be back tomorrow." He spoke with absolute certainty, yet failed to notice the strange emptiness gnawing at his heart. Downstairs he frowned and asked the housekeeper, "Has Madam not come home yet today?" "I'm not really sure," the housekeeper replied, keeping her head bowed, "but she left her keys on the dining table, sir." Asher's brows just began to knit together when Eleanor Zhao let out a startled gasp, jolting him out of his thoughts. He turned to see her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "It's all my fault. Is it because I took her place that she doesn't want this family anymore? That she doesn't want you anymore?" Asher rubbed his throbbing temples, his voice laced with impatience. "She knows you're here to recover. Stop overthinking things." It wasn't until he helped the woman to the sofa that his gaze fell on the wedding ring lying on the coffee table. His heart skipped a beat. It was a plain, simple band he'd bought on a whim, yet I'd cherished it like a priceless treasure, wearing it faithfully for 3 whole years. I'd taken it off only when bathing, afraid it might slip off my finger, only when cooking, worried it might get scratched. Even after he'd long since exchanged vows and rings with Eleanor Zhao, I'd never once taken that simple band off. Now it lay there quietly on the glass coffee table, completely ignored. A fit of soft coughing broke through Asher Fu's wandering thoughts. He hurried to help Eleanor Zhao upstairs to rest. If he didn't look at that ring, he told himself, nothing would have changed. The next morning Asher's eyes fluttered open, his voice still thick with the hoarseness of sleep. "Beatrice, I have an international meeting today. I need to wear that." His words died abruptly on his lips. He almost forgot I'd stormed out of the house in a fit of anger. For so many nights after we got married, whenever he was home, I would always have his suit ironed and ready in advance, rushing over at the sound of his voice. But today the woman lying beside him was someone else entirely, someone who needed his care. Her sleeping face was beautiful, yet somehow he found himself with no desire to admire it. Reluctantly he got up and made his way to the walk-in closet. As the motion sensor lights flickered on one by one, he froze, stunned to see that half of the closet was suddenly empty. "Asher." Before he knew it, Eleanor Zhao was leaning against the doorframe in a silk nightgown, her voice soft and tentative. "I checked the flight tickets." Her lips moved, chattering away about something or other. But he just stared blankly at the half-empty closet, not a single word registering in his mind. His thoughts drifted back to the day Eleanor Zhao had first returned to the country. Everyone had pressured me to give up my husband, and I'd broken down in tears, saying it wasn't fair to her. After returning home, I'd packed my bags in a fit of pique, ready to leave. But in the end he'd said, "I want to eat the dumplings you make," and I'd put on my apron and headed straight for the kitchen. But this time I'd left so quietly, as if nothing in the world could hold me back anymore. "What do you think of this plan?" Eleanor Zhao asked excitedly, waving her phone in front of him. Asher finally snapped out of his daze. "Maldives? Are you sure your body can handle the trip? The doctor said my latest test results are excellent." A flush of color rose to her pale cheeks. "Let's go. To fulfill my last wish, please." He hesitated for a moment, then finally nodded his head. During dinner his mother-in-law called. Eleanor told me everything. Her voice was warm and doting on the other end of the line. "Take her away for a nice vacation. As for Beatrice..." "Mom." Eleanor Zhao suddenly snatched the phone from his hand, casting a glance at Asher, who'd been distracted all night. She began to sob. "Don't put Asher in a difficult position. I don't want to go anymore." She coughed so hard she could barely straighten up, her voice trembling. "It's not like it's some kind of must-do bucket list item anyway." Asher patted her back gently, his voice softening. Don't be silly. I need to tell Beatrice about this. He reached for his phone, about to dial my number, when his brother-in-law Zhao strode into the room and snatched the phone away from him. No need to tell her, he said gruffly. She'd definitely try to stop you. Wait until you two are already in the Maldives before letting her know. By then it'll be too late for her to throw a fit. At Zhao's words, Asher reluctantly abandoned the idea of letting me know. It started to rain outside the window. Asher suddenly remembered how terrified I was of thunder. During the last rainstorm I'd curled up in his arms and asked, "If I disappear one day, will you come looking for me?" What had he replied back then? "You can run to the ends of the earth, but you'll never escape my grasp." But now Eleanor Zhao let out a soft cough, pulling him back to the present. He looked at her pale, delicate face and told himself that he was merely fulfilling the dying wish of a terminally ill woman. That Beatrice was just being petty. Besides, she was my own sister after all. Before the private jet took off, Asher found himself opening his chat box with me on an impulse. The last message had been sent 4 days ago. He stared at that lonely green message bubble, his finger hovering over the keyboard for a long time. Finally, he typed out a message. A sharp, eye-stinging red exclamation mark popped up beside the message instantly. Asher's finger froze mid-air. He'd been blocked? Asher. Eleanor Zhao leaned over, wrapping a silk scarf around her shoulders. Her eyes flicked across his phone screen, a flash of coldness darting through them before she quickly replaced it with a look of innocent vulnerability. Is Beatrice still angry with me? She bit her lower lip gently, her eyes welling up with tears almost immediately. It's all my fault. If only I wasn't so sick. Asher locked his phone, his voice tight. Stop overthinking things. With the woman's interruption breaking through his momentary confusion, their trip finally got back on track. But he couldn't shake the feeling of unease that lingered in the back of his mind, distracting him at every turn. Upon arriving at the hotel, Eleanor Zhao immediately pressed herself against him. Asher, she whispered, her breath coming in short, rapid puffs against his ear. We're legally married now. What are you still hesitating for? Asher grabbed her restless hand, his voice strained. Your body isn't fully recovered yet. Eleanor Zhao bit her lip unwillingly, her body going limp as she collapsed into his arms. But I can take it. Asher patted her back absently, his gaze fixed on the phone lying on the nightstand. The screen lit up and dimmed repeatedly, yet the familiar number he was waiting for never appeared. I'll go get you a glass of water. He excused himself, getting up and walking over to the floor-to-ceiling window where he lit a cigarette. 4 days on end he found himself overcome with an overwhelming urge to go home. He also grew increasingly confused by Eleanor Zhao's behavior. One day she was so weak she could barely walk. The next she was running and jumping on the beach, picking up seashells like a healthy young woman. Asher, she called out to him, emerging from the sea in a bikini, her skin slightly sun-kissed. The doctor said sunbathing is good for my recovery. Yeah. He replied absently, heading back to the room to fetch something. On his way he accidentally knocked over her handbag. A jumble of bottles and jars spilled out onto the floor. Among them, a box of ovulation-inducing pills stood out prominently, its expiration date showing it had only been opened the previous week. He recognized them instantly because I'd taken the exact same pills 2 years ago, desperate to give him a daughter. The memory hit him like a ton of bricks, how I'd thrown up violently after taking them, yet still forced a smile through the tears, saying, "It's okay. It's just a little nausea. I'm fine. Let's try again." A wave of sharp, piercing guilt washed over him. But, could someone in the late stages of cancer even take these pills? Even if they could, why was she taking them? Asher slammed the suitcase shut with a loud bang, immediately dialing his assistant's number. Check all of Eleanor Zhao's chemotherapy records in the country. Now. Half an hour later his assistant called back, his voice tight with hesitation. "Mr. Fu, I've checked the Central Hospital and the Cancer Hospital. There's no record of Ms. Zhao ever being admitted for treatment." The assistant paused, then added, But what?" Asher demanded, his heart pounding wildly in his chest. "I found a record of Madame's miscarriage. The date is..." The assistant's voice dropped to a whisper. Last Wednesday. Last Wednesday. The day of the family portrait. A deafening roar exploded in Asher's ears. He remembered my deathly pale face that day, the way I'd clutched my stomach and doubled over in agony. He remembered the cruel words he'd spat at me, pretending to be sick after just one slap. Eleanor is dying of late-stage cancer and she's not half as dramatic as you are. His fingers trembled violently as he dialed my number, only to be met with a cold, mechanical voice message. The number you have dialed is no longer in service. Asher couldn't believe it. He refused to believe it. His child. The baby he and his wife had longed for 2 whole years, he'd killed it with his own hands. He fumbled for his phone, dialing his mother-in-law's number in a panic. "Mom. Has Beatrice come home? Where is she?" The clatter of mahjong tiles echoed from the other end of the line. "That girl. 7 of bamboo. Who knows where she's hiding to throw her little tantrum. Just focus on taking good care of Eleanor." His brows furrowed tightly as he hung up and dialed his brother-in-law's number instead. "Has Beatrice contacted you? You need to. You need to find her right now. She's a grown woman in her 20s. What could possibly happen to her?" Zhao replied impatiently. "Did Eleanor have a good time today?" Asher suddenly felt a surge of absurdity wash over him. The way this family treated their own daughter, their own sister, with such cold indifference. It was as if she were a complete stranger. He slammed the phone down in a rage. But deep down, was this really the first time he'd noticed how much the Zhao family favored Eleanor Zhao and neglected his wife? Oh. He'd noticed it years ago, back when he was engaged to Eleanor Zhao, the quiet, stubborn little daughter of the Zhao family, always being left out and bullied. Her eyes had shone brightly despite everything, like a beacon in the dark night sea, searing an indelible mark in his mind. When Eleanor Zhao had left the country back then, had he proposed to me out of spite? Oh, he'd meant it. He'd truly wanted to give her a home, a place where she would be loved, where she would finally have a family that cared about her. And now he'd turned her into a child with no home to call her own. He'd foolishly convinced himself that he was waiting for someone, clinging to an unfinished love story. But all along that someone had been right beside him. That love story had already been written and he'd been too blind to see it. As soon as the plane touched down, Asher Fu bolted straight back to the villa. Aunt Lu was polishing the vase by the entrance when she saw him rushing in, covered in dust and looking disheveled. She hesitated for a moment before speaking. "Sir, Madam hasn't been back since you left the country." His footsteps faltered for a second, then he turned around and headed out again. But just as he pulled open the car door, he froze abruptly. Go to the Zhao family's house? That family had once left her home alone with a 40-degree fever while they all went on a trip. How could they possibly care about her whereabouts now? He scrolled through his phone contacts from top to bottom, only to be hit by a devastating realization: he didn't have the phone number of a single one of my friends. For the past 3 years, my entire world had revolved around him. "Sir," the driver asked cautiously, "where are we going?" The roar of the engine drowned out his thoughts when a call from old Master Fu came through. "Since you're back today, get to the auction right away. That kid from the Zhou family has been stirring up trouble lately. Go put him in his place." He was about to say something when Mrs. Fu snatched the phone from the other end. "You finally remembered to come home. I sent someone to check that nightclub and the surveillance footage shows Beatrice was never there. I knew the daughter-in-law I picked couldn't be so shameless and rude. That Eleanor Zhao is nothing but a liar. If you hadn't acted without my permission, I would never have let her into this family." A sharp, searing pain shot through Asher Fu's heart. He had shared a bed with me for 3 years. How could he not have believed me? But he'd thought Eleanor had only spread those lies about her own sister to gain his parents' acceptance. He'd also worried that exposing her would worsen her condition. In the end, he hadn't been able to bring himself to say a single word in my defense. Not even a simple, "she's not that kind of person." He'd even let those tabloid journalists blow those fabricated evidences out of proportion. How utterly desperate must his Beatrice have been back then? He stumbled through the day in a daze, not even realizing he had arrived at the auction venue until he was sitting in the audience. If it weren't for the pair of jadeite earrings displayed on the stage, he wouldn't have snapped out of his stupor at all. Memories flooded back. How I loved collecting jadeite more than anything else. He was just about to raise his bidding paddle. 3 million yuan. A familiar voice cut through the crowd, instantly grabbing Asher Fu's attention. He turned his head and froze. There stood Benedict Zhou lazily holding up his bidding paddle. And beside him sat the woman he had been yearning for day and night, dressed in an elegant dark green dress, a soft smile playing on her lips, the first smile he hadn't seen in far too long. Beatrice. He rushed toward her, only to trip over the carpet and crash to his knees hard. Beatrice. So you're here. I'm back now. Come home with me. I lowered my eyes to look at him, my gaze as calm and indifferent as if I were looking at a complete stranger. That look, devoid of any love or hatred, pierced his heart like 1,000 knives. Beatrice. What's wrong with you? It's me. Mr. Fu, what exactly is my supposed identity if I go back with you? I laughed softly, my tone tinged with helplessness. You're my wife, of course. Beatrice, listen to me explain. Eleanor and I were just someone who held a fake marriage certificate for 3 years. Does that still count as a wife? I twirled the diamond ring on my finger boredly. Asher Fu's face paled instantly. You know. I'm sorry. I can explain. His voice trembled uncontrollably. I'll divorce her right away. Just a 1-month cooling off period, and then. He reached out to grab my hand, but Benedict Zhou blocked him firmly. I'm sorry, Mr. Fu, Benedict Zhou said suddenly, wrapping an arm around my shoulders protectively. She's Mrs. Zhou now. I'd appreciate it if you didn't lay your hands on her. Asher Fu froze for a second, then shot back coldly. Beatrice was married to me for 3 years. Even without that piece of paper, we were no different from a real married couple. You chased after her relentlessly back then, making a scene all over the city, and she still refused to marry you. Now she spent 3 years by my side, loving and understanding each other deeply. Why on earth would she ever marry you? Faced with Benedict Zhou, Asher Fu suddenly regained his confidence. Yes, Benedict Zhou had chased after me once. But that was only because I'd warned him not to drink a spiked drink at a cocktail party once, and he'd felt indebted to me ever since. I'd asked him to help me ward off trouble before I got married. If he kept up the pretense of pursuing me and made a big fuss about it, my parents wouldn't dare to offend him, and thus wouldn't casually force me into a political marriage. But Asher Fu, the top heir of Beijing's elite circle, hadn't been intimidated by him at all. Right after Eleanor Zhao had run off from their engagement, he turned around and proposed to me instead. I'd envied Eleanor Zhao since I was a child, thinking everything she had was better than mine. I couldn't say I was truly in love with Asher Fu, but I didn't dislike him either. Desperate to escape my toxic family back then, I'd said yes. The irony was that I'd thought my relationship with Benedict Zhou was nothing more than a charade. But he had actually been pursuing me sincerely, ready to marry me for real if I just nodded my head. While the Asher Fu I'd chosen had deceived me for 3 long years with a fake marriage certificate. Now it was time for me to give the right person the sense of security he deserved. I pulled out the brand new red marriage certificate from my bag, my voice steady and clear as I spoke each word slowly. I'm sorry to disappoint you, but this time it's a real marriage. With a real marriage certificate. In the red background photo, I was smiling brightly and radiantly. The world spun black before Asher Fu's eyes, but he heard Benedict Zhou's voice cutting in, delivering the final blow. Oh, and by the way, I suggest you look into why Eleanor Zhao ran away from your engagement 3 years ago. Benedict Zhou leaned down and whispered in Asher Fu's ear, his voice cold and mocking. I've dug up every single dirty detail about that woman who made me wait for my goddess for 3 years, details that are clearer than the back of your hand. The gavel fell on the stage, finalizing the bid. Benedict Zhou stood up and presented the jadeite earrings to me in front of the entire audience. After investigating, the truth finally came to light. 3 years ago, Eleanor Zhao had accepted a bribe of 80 million yuan and leaked Fu Group's new energy technical parameters. Asher Fu finally realized that from the very beginning, he had been nothing more than a foolish pawn in her game. The woman he had cherished with all his heart, the woman he had waited for 3 long years, had almost destroyed the Fu Group, and then she had turned him against his own wife. Mr. Fu, his assistant hesitated, his voice hesitant. Ms. Zhao is causing a scene at the development meeting. She's demanding a divorce and insists on getting half of your assets. Asher Fu said nothing and did nothing. He just wandered around like a lost soul, showing up in front of me again and again. He waited in the pouring rain outside Zhou Group's building until midnight. When a security guard took pity on him and offered him an umbrella, he shook his head stubbornly. I have to let her see me like this. At the cafe I frequented, he pushed a document toward me with trembling hands. I've set up a foundation in your name. Isn't helping those children in the mountain villages something you've always wanted to do? When I tried to leave, he blocked my way, his eyes red with unshed tears. Beatrice. Let me make amends for what I've done. But I was tired, too tired to even spare him a glance. It wasn't until he mentioned the child we had lost, the child who had never gotten the chance to be born, that my footsteps faltered for a split second. My voice was so soft it was barely audible. I even had a name picked out for her. Asher Fu collapsed to his knees instantly, his entire body going limp as if his backbone had been torn out from under him. Later one day I was trying on wedding dresses at a bridal shop when the sales clerk reminded me that there was a staggering figure outside the glass window, staring inside intently. I turned my head and saw Asher Fu, clutching an empty wine bottle in his hand, his bloodshot eyes fixed on the wedding dress I was wearing. Benedict Zhou frowned in displeasure, stepping in front of me protectively without a moment's hesitation. Seeing this, the man outside the store pushed the door open and stumbled straight in. The lock screen. He slurred, his trembling finger pointing at the phone on the table. Where are our photos? The lock screen displayed a photo of Benedict Zhou and me skiing in Switzerland. I picked up the phone calmly, my voice cold. Mr. Fu, peeking at other people's phones is against the law. His body jolted as if those words had pierced his heart. He staggered back 2 steps and the wine bottle in his hand crashed to the floor, shattering into pieces. I don't believe it. 3 years. How could I possibly lose to him? I just made a mistake. I was a victim too. Eleanor Zhao lied to me, she lied to everyone. Beatrice. Give me one more chance. We can both get divorced and then get married again properly. Please. Just say yes. The bridal shop owner didn't recognize the famous Mr. Fu. Seeing her customer being harassed, she immediately called the security guards to throw him out. I continued trying on my wedding dress, completely unaffected by the commotion. The glass door slammed shut behind him, but Asher Fu's voice still seeped through the cracks. Beatrice. I'll give you the justice you deserve. Just wait for me. His obsession grew like a vine, wild and unyielding. A week later, Eleanor Zhao was abducted and dragged into a private hospital, where she was injected with a special drug. Asher Fu stood outside the ward, watching her coldly through the glass as she struggled, then weakened, until the doctor finally delivered the diagnosis: late-stage lymphoma. Does it hurt? He asked her through the glass, his voice devoid of any emotion. Is it more painful than a miscarriage? You liked pretending to be a cancer patient so much? Fine. Then you can spend the rest of your life with those cancer cells eating you alive. And under his ruthless, vindictive tactics, the Zhao family's company went bankrupt in no time at all. My brother was also arrested for commercial crimes. My parents knelt before me, crying and begging for forgiveness. We were blind. We were fooled by that unfilial daughter for 20 years. Save your brother. If you go back to Asher Fu, you can save him and our family's business. I let out a cold laugh and held a press conference immediately, announcing that I was severing all ties with them. Even if the law didn't recognize the severance of blood relations, I would make it known to the whole world. I would provide them with the minimum amount of support required by law, not a cent more, not a cent less. When Asher Fu learned that I would rather cut off all contact with my family than go back to him just to get my brother out of jail, he finally realized there was nothing left in this world that could threaten me anymore. Later, Benedict Zhou held a wedding of the century for me, broadcast live to the entire world. The news of Asher Fu's car accident came in the middle of the night on our wedding day. I stood outside the ICU ward, staring through the glass at his body, covered in tubes and wires. It wasn't long before his heart stopped beating. The nurse couldn't pry open his tightly clenched right hand, so she looked at me for help. It seems like this is for you. It was a birthday card, soaked through with blood. I opened it carefully. His bold, vigorous handwriting had blurred into smudges of ink. Beatrice, I was so lucky to have met you. The signature was dated on my first birthday as Mrs. Fu.